So our next speaker is, sorry for spelling, Kingsley Mbamara Sabastine from Catholic University of Lublin. And Kingsley will give a talk on the methods of practicing Christian philosophy with specific reference to Stanislaw Kaminski. And I think I'm fascinated to hear about this because first there will be a Polish philosopher, and the second reason is finally we have someone talking specifically on Christian philosophy. So we have asked all of those questions about whether Christian philosophy exists and how is it distinguishable from the non-Christian philosophy. So I can see that Kingsley is with us. I will now display the Kingsley's lecture or the talk, and then please keep all your questions in your mind and ask them after the talk.
Good day, and welcome everyone listening. My name is Kingsley Mbamara from the John Paul II Catholic University of Lublin. The title of my presentation is Methods of Practicing Christian Philosophy with a specific reference to Stanislaw Kaminski. Introduction. Kaminsky proposes a unique method that is truly philosophical, but also Christian in nature. His doctrinal standpoints are philosophically rational, objective, and universal, but it is also most friendly and compatible with Christian faith. It is only in this sense I speak of the Christian nature of his philosophy and the suitability of his methodology for the practice of Christian philosophy. I do not pretend to present all that constitutes Kaminsky's concept of philosophy. I will focus only on those aspects that have immediate relevance to the thesis defended in this paper. The development of Kaminsky's ideas have been divided into three stages: non-metaphysical, pro-metaphysical, and wisdom-oriented. The last two divisions bear what is considered as the Christian nature of his philosophy. Without getting entangled in the debate whether there is such a thing as Christian philosophy, and not just philosophers who are Christian, what follows from here is a survey of Kaminsky's concept of philosophy, which he equated with a theory of being or general metaphysics, and his methodology of that theory in order to show in what sense it is Christian in nature and why it is suitable for the practice of Christian philosophy. Kaminsky's concept of philosophy. Kaminsky's philosophical ideas were developed within the Lublin Philosophical School, but in dialogue and debate with other schools of philosophy. Kaminsky described the philosophy of the Lublin Philosophical School as classical. It is a philosophy that refers to the Aristotelian Thomist tradition, but further developed in accordance to logical and methodological rigor. It is the understanding he considered the most appropriate and most aptly rendering its sense, first of all, as a particular type of metaphysics, began by Aristotle as having its specific object and purpose of inquiry. The consideration of its object and purpose determined the choice of its method of inquiry into everything that really exists and the discovery of the ultimate causes of existence and functioning of all that really exists. The methodological autonomy and the methodological epistemological unity and approach fitting to this philosophical system was carefully delineated by Kaminsky in the light of the theory of being and in connection to the theory of science. According to Kaminsky, we therefore regard the theory of being as equal in its scope to metaphysics, and we identify it with the entire classical philosophy, which constitutes a science that is one and indivisible with regard to its formal object and its method of explanation, both in which it is possible to distinguish partially autonomous disciplines due to their particular starting points. The theory of being meets the requirement of not only being autonomous, and rational, but the foundation of all branches of philosophy and disciplines. According to Kaminsky, if we assume that classical philosophy explains any object given in experience in its ultimate and necessary ontic aspect, each particular type of reality is ultimately explained also in the same way as being in general, that is, by the structure of being. This philosophy is an ingenious blend of classical philosophy and modern thought to construct a new philosophical system based on the theory of being in answer to the question, how to philosophize. The explication of this philosophy in terms of its originality clearly demonstrates a strict scientific, methodological, and heterogeneous approach to analyzing objects that is philosophical as one of its distinctive features, which is both the influence and the consequence of Kaminsky's in-depth knowledge and interest in history, logic, and science. As a result, this philosophical system is devoid of hasty generalization, but concisely and systematically synthesizing themes from tradition and contemporary philosophy, inspired and guided by metaphilosophical and zoological beliefs and methodological anthropological motivation to perfectly construe his philosophy. The Christian nature of Kaminsky's philosophy. The first indicator of the Christian nature of classical philosophy, as understood by Kaminsky, can be found in its function with regard to theology. According to Kaminsky, the aspiration of theology to be a true scholarly domain can be aided and fulfilled more perfectly by philosophy, which is the natural cognition of reality. The knowledge acquired by metaphysics, expressed in general and abstract terms, does provide theology and supernatural knowledge with tools for explaining the truth of religious faith and the human being in relation to God. Such assistance and function by philosophy in relation to supernatural knowledge and theology is not found in every philosophical system that tries to explain reality. The second mark of the Christian nature of classical philosophy can be seen in its concept of God. As mentioned earlier, classical philosophy starts from experience and examines real being under the general aspect of existence and searches for the ultimate reasons of being. The concept of the theory of being, Kaminsky claims, presupposes the rational character of the world and the possibility of its ultimate theoretical explanation. For in the process of the ultimate explanation of being, the absolute being is recognized as the reason for being in general. And so a system of theses concerning the existence and essence of the absolute should fit in general metaphysics as its culmination. Thus, the metaphysical concept of the absolute is compatible with the Christian understanding of God, even if neither concept of God nor the thesis of God's existence are capable of becoming the starting point of explanation in the theory of being. Therefore, Kaminsky's metaphysics, to the extent that it is open to transcendent reality and helps to understand the rationality of faith, could be said to be Christian in nature. Third, Christian nature of Kaminsky's philosophy can be sought in the tradition to which Kaminsky adhered. Andreas Brunk has identified the double heritage that Kaminsky enjoyed as the scholastic and the tradition of the Lulov Warsaw School. Through philosophical and theological studies, he placed himself within the framework of existential Thomism. This dual heritage had influenced his analytical synthetic approach and the direction of his interests. Consequently, he conceived metaphysics to be indispensable and sufficient for full establishment of the rational basis of a worldview and for validating strictly philosophical implications of scientific cognition. That worldview was shaped by Christianity, which at the time Kaminsky wrote was under the attacks of Marxists and positivists who rejected metaphysics and the worldview it supports. Kaminsky's theory of being was partly a reaction to this attack, though it is far from being a philosophical polemics for Christianity. It is most friendly and reconcilable to Christian doctrine. Fourth, Kaminsky endorses the long-standing tradition in classical philosophy of equating and associating philosophical knowledge with wisdom. Philosophy constitutes and generates special kind of knowledge, that is, wisdom. Wisdom here is understood to mean more than the accumulation of information. It is about having the knowledge of the value, ultimate principle, and purpose of things in relation to themselves and to life and existence. From the metaphilosophical perspective of classical philosophy, Kaminsky claims that complete metaphysical cognition constitutes the fundamental element of the house of wisdom, and the wisdom, taken ideally, is the necessary model, the beginning and the aim of philosophizing. If such metaphilosophical as well as metaphysical and anthropological assumptions are accepted, the category of wisdom becomes indispensable in philosophy. Such emphasis, which reference philosophy with wisdom, resonate with Christian theology and are not peculiar to Kaminsky. Stronger relation of philosophy with wisdom appeared in the writings of Pope John Paul II in his book Crossing the Threshold of Hope, and as well as in the cyclical Fides et Ratio, where he expressed the need for a philosophy that has a true metaphysical range and wisdom-oriented character. Before Pope John Paul II, Jacques Maritain asserted that wisdom is the highest knowledge, most fundamental, and ultimately grounded. Its systematized version is to some extent constituted by philosophy, or more specifically, classical metaphysics, which is located between science and wisdom. Similarly, Kaminsky maintains that wisdom may come also from sources not typical to natural cognition, but from supernatural faith. Then the deepest understanding occurs in the light of the revelation. Its systematized form is usually theology. The two orders of wisdom are not contrary or contradictory to each other. Neither does one supplant the other. Rather, one leads to the other. Kaminsky's classical philosophy tends naturally towards transcendence and consequently towards theology. Thus, Kaminsky's metaphysics is Christian philosophy in the sense that it indicates, in the words of John Paul II, a Christian way of philosophizing, a philosophical speculation conceived in dynamic union with faith. It does not, therefore, refer simply to a philosophy developed by Christian philosophers who have striven in their research not to contradict the faith. It will not be impossible, but certainly strange and difficult, to distance Kaminsky's metaphysics from the religious undertone underlying its Christian nature. The suitability of Kaminsky's methodology to practicing Christian philosophy. Methodological development and exploration in both science and philosophy are some of the most important areas of Kaminsky's contributions to philosophy and science. Kaminsky's method is conciliatory, analytic, and innovative in its approach to well-established tradition on the one hand, and on the other hand, new developments and approaches in philosophy. Hence, Kaminsky writes that the conception of being cares not for the faithfulness that either to Thomist tradition or to some likings of philosophical thinkers. Instead, it seeks to be faithful primarily to its natural object, the existing reality. Thus, the suitability of this philosophy also arises from the fact that it makes use of the method of objective cognition, for the reason of which it examines and explains apprehended and objective reality so that truly transcendental knowledge is acquired, and consequently avoiding the error of falling into idealism, subjectivism, and relativism. If one takes into account that the concept of human dignity and truth are central to Christianity, the relevance, contribution, and suitability of Kaminsky's concept of philosophy and method in relation to practicing Christian philosophy should be evident. Kaminsky's approach has its origin in the desire to formalize and systematize philosophy for the reasons of understanding, meaning, clarity, precision in both thought and expression, but does all for the sake of explaining reality by reference to the ultimate ontic reasons. As a theologian, methodologist, and analyst, these goals were actualized through the conception and explanation of the theory of being by the Thomistic and the analytical logical method. Kaminsky understood clearly the strength and the deficiency of each method and therefore combined or synthesized both methods to form one method that could overcome the weakness inherent in a single method taken alone. This is a very significant advantage. Kaminsky's concept of philosophy and methodology thus provide a constructive method and philosophical rigor for Christian philosophers that constitute an important advantage crucial to engagement in the contemporary philosophical discourse, debate, and dialogue, and consequent to the emergence of a genuine theological philosophical worldview that is also genuinely Christian in its outcome and nature. Kaminsky's philosophy shows that it is possible to search for truth with autonomous methods and acquire objective knowledge, and at the same time be open to the transcendence. In conclusion, if the argument is valid and true as presented by Kaminsky, in order to understand the deepest objective truths about man and his position within the world and in relation to God, a theologian must employ a metaphysical theory of reality. The argument points to only one fact, that is, such a philosophy has elements that are agreeable to faith or simply that it is Christian in nature. Kaminsky's concept of philosophy and methodology meet all the requirements to be considered as Christian in nature without compromising its status as pure, universal, objective, and autonomous philosophy.
Thank you very much, Kingsley. That was Stanislaw Kaminski and his idea of Christian philosophy. Stanislaw Kaminski was a well-known methodologist, Polish, in the 20th century. So, do we have any questions here on site? I see no questions. Maybe we will move to the questions from WebEx participants. I can see Daniel. Hello, Daniel. Just please unmute yourself, ask the question.
Hi there. Thanks, Kingsley, for that. That was really engaging. I wasn't familiar with this with Kaminsky before, so thanks for making me privy to him. I do wonder a bit about wisdom and sort of this transcendental knowledge that he talks about, and obviously this is quite common in the Catholic philosophical tradition. You say his philosophy and especially his metaphysics are specifically Christian, but then it seems to me when he gets to the wisdom stuff, I think there was a quote in there where he seems to say that this wisdom is almost an indispensable part of Christian philosophizing, or the apex perhaps of Christian philosophizing. And I guess maybe one of my worries there is I'm channeling sort of Pascal here when he has his experience saying, oh, this is not the God of the philosophers, but the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. So I guess to what extent do you see wisdom as an absolutely necessary component in Christian philosophy? Or does Kaminsky see this as a necessary component? And where's the St. Paul's shaming of the wisdom of the world, and reveling in the sort of the foolishness of the cross? Where does the foolishness of the cross come into this? Does that make sense?
Can you hear me? Okay. I think you don't understand to that when St. Paul talked about wisdom, what it means that contradicted the Christian faith or contradicted the person of Christ. And within the years when philosophy developed and Christianity fully met the Western world or Western philosophy, and the period of personification of wisdom, it was mostly recognized as equivalent or as personification. Christ now becoming personification of wisdom. And it is in this sense too that we see philosophy to the extent that it helps to explain faith, but it helps to explain the person of Christ that it represents such kind of wisdom. That's why I remember the quotation there I made of what John Paul II said, that it is said would deny or reject such kind of wisdom if it helps. I don't know if I asked the question very well.
Kingsley, we can't hear you very well. And on YouTube now, we have some troubles with the connection. Would you be able to respond?
Very well?
Yeah, better. But this is about internet connection, I guess.
Yeah, it may be about internet connection and microphone.
Okay. Daniel, did you understood the answer?
Yeah, no, I got most of it until the end there. I think I get the general trend of where Kingsley's going with that. I might send you an email, Kingsley, to ask a further question if that's all right.
Okay, no problem. I'll be glad to see your question.
Okay, anyone more? Any questions? We have 2 questions from the stream, and I liked very one. The first, I will ask both, and just the first question is: what's the relation between theology and philosophy? If there is a concept of Christian philosophy, what is it? Isn't it simply theology? What would you say? What would Stanislaw Kaminski say? And the other question, and I love this question, is is there a Christian physics and is there a Christian mathematics, if we say about Christian philosophy? So what would you say this, and what would Stanislaw Kaminski answer to this? Thanks.
If you have been following closely, there's debate within the Philosophical School of Lublin about the existence of Christian philosophy or non-existence of Christian philosophy. And there are those who clearly say it doesn't exist, and those who say that it exists. But Christian philosophy is differentiated from theology, and also differentiated from natural theology, because, as I said there, that philosophy is pure natural wisdom, and has its own specific methods and object of studies, and which is different from theology, which has also its the object of study and thing. And whether if there is Christian physics or Christian physics or Christian in such manner, because philosophy deals with object different from metaphysics and physics, which deals with ordinary things, physical things that you can touch and feel, and theology also deals with things, particularly to that we cannot really tangible with hand. It makes it more closer with philosophy. And so in that sense, we can't talk about Christian physics, or talk about Christian chemistry, or talk about Christian mathematics. These are general concepts or general things that ordinarily everybody should recognize and differentiate from pure understanding of cognition or methodology of understanding things such as philosophy such as philosophy portrays or tries to do.